sir. Let me make sure my camera's going to hit here. Let's go here. Turn that on. Let's go. There we go. Okay.
There he is. Hey, man.
What's up, brother?
All right, check your teeth. There you. Oh! I love it, dude. I love a good marketing slogan.
If you get to Dallas, I got you a shirt, brother.
I'm coming, dude. Actually, I wait on you to send me details. I'm ready to rock. I got to approve with my boss, aka my wife. Let's roll. All right, let me get this webinar started.
Okay.
All right, welcome in everyone to our Symphony webinar, and we're gonna get going here in just a second. I want to introduce myself. My name is Ellis Hammond. If we have not met, I am one of the founding managers and principals of Symphony Capital Group. We're a full-time multifamily investment firm, and really we serve passive investors, those who want to diversify their capital into multifamily real estate primarily. And so we are San Diego based. However, we've bought in multiple markets, primarily focused today in the Texas market. And we essentially just, offer an alternative solution for investors who want to be into real estate. And so we buy primarily 150 to 200 plus unit multifamily real estate deals, value add opportunities that create, cash flow dividends for investors on a monthly or quarterly basis, and the opportunity to experience some type of capital event in year 3 or 4, rather than be a refinance or an exit, giving the opportunity for investors to double their capital in 3 to 5 to 6 year time frame. And so that's a little bit about us. Excited for today. I have and here his website is my friend Brett Swarts, who is the founder, CEO of Capital Gains Tax Solutions. And I'm really, really excited to have Brett on today. And if you're here, it's probably because you saw our email about, what is the alternative to 1031s? Like, is that the only way to continue to defer taxes and continue to keep your money working for you? I mean, one of the biggest wealth killers, the two biggest wealth killers that we know of, are fees and taxes. And so if there's a way to continue to push that ball down the court, the faster and the bigger we can continue to compound wealth. The problem with the 1031, as we'll get into today, is that there are some restrictions. There's a timeline restriction. You may not be able to find the great asset. And especially if you want to work with us, if you're selling something, whether you're selling a business or you're selling a piece of real estate, we may not always be able to accept your syndication, your 1031 proceeds. And so Brett and I have been speaking for, I don't know, Brett, a while, right, man, about how we can begin to work together and get our clients with you, and so that you can provide an alternative solution for them to not be so hamstrung on what to do with the 1031. And so that's what we're going to get in today. If you have any questions, please let us know in the chat, and be happy to answer those while we're on this call today. And we will be making a recording of this available. And so, Brett, without further ado, welcome to our webinar. Why don't you give a brief introduction?
Ellis, thanks so much for having me. Pleasure to be here, everybody. I'm Brett Swarts, founder of Capital Gains Tax Solutions, multifamily investor, broker, grew up in the industry, loving real estate, and I still do. And we just found that there's a big problem. People want to exit real estate or businesses, cryptocurrency, primary homes, and they have a capital gains tax of about 25 to 50% of their gain. And so we like to say it's just not about cash flow, it's also about tax flow, and to the ability that you can extend and defer and build a wealth plan that incorporates tax flow, deferring taxes, sometimes eliminate estate taxes. You can create and preserve more wealth. And so we're going to share with you the Deferred Sales Trust, which we laser focus on, and to help you defer the tax, say fail in 1031 exchanges, move into syndication deals with Ellis, or different opportunities, private or passive or active. Diversify your wealth. It's going to be a great presentation.
Yeah, so let's get into that, Brett. And I think the biggest questions, I'm happy to either ask them or you can present, but I think here's some things I definitely want to cover is how can we just eliminate the 1031 without taking on this big tax burden, right? How can we leverage a DST and then take those same proceeds and invest in things like a syndication? And then I also really would like to talk about how to use, particularly investing into a syndication deal. Like, we have so many folks who want a 1031, right? And they say, well, we can't accept 1031. So navigate the process of what it would look like to come to you, to work with you, to say, hey, I actually could sell this house. I have $1 million of proceeds. Maybe I put $500,000 with Symphony. And because I'm not locked into 1031, I could go put another $500,000 into the stock market, right? So we want to talk about that as well. So let's get into it.
I've got a whole presentation. That's cool. I'm gonna kick us off with a little video here. I'm gonna share my sound to give you guys some inspiration and show you some of my strategic alliances. So here we go.
Are you telling me that you have a way to defer the tax situation there? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And so the first one I was referring to is a 1031 exchange, which only applies to investment real estate. The second one I'm referring to is called a deferred sales trust.
A real eye opener to see that there are ways that people can use the regulatory framework, if properly structured, to invest 1031 exchange dollars in things that you would not think were like kind to what they exited from. So it was very impressive. I got to say, you are the first one I've seen pull this off, and I'm pretty hesitant to believe in a lot of these kinds of things. So it's a major feat for me to say, wow, this actually really worked, and it was really cool.
1031 is a way to shelter your income when you sell the thing. The DST is a way to avoid the 1031 and not have to suffer the time penalty.
Our career and during different tax periods, we've seen, these tax avoidance, tax minimization, offshore, all these different strategies undertaken to minimize or avoid taxes. And then I can tell you that, some of them are just not worth the trouble. And so I was skeptical. Admittedly, I was skeptical. I thought, oh yeah, here we go, another one of these, right? And then they say, no, it really is different, right? So look more closely. We looked more closely. We had, honestly, 2 years of conversations. 2 years. Now we were being due diligence at the same time that we were doing due diligence, but 2 years is a long time to be, sort of flirting with the idea of and getting to know the people and getting to really understand the transaction. Yeah, long story short, we got comfortable, although we are not tax attorneys, lawyers, or estate planning attorneys, that at least, from an investment perspective, that, it made sense to sell a highly appreciated asset, get liquid, hold that in this type of a deferred or installment sale type of instrument, and then just be in a position then to do the most important thing. I'm probably stealing your next question, which is time. They say, well, you can't make more time. You can. The Deferred Sales Trust, in a way, allows you to lengthen the investment time horizon for those assets after getting liquid, but before having to feel the tax impact. And from an investment manager's perspective, time horizon is the most important element in investing.
All right, so here we go. We're going to dive right into this presentation here. I'm excited to show you how to do this, right? That's really the key, how to do this, why it works, why it's legal. If you have questions along the way, you can put them in the chat. And you can also check us out at capitalgainstaxsolutions.com and our YouTube channel. We have that going as well. This presentation is called Deferred Sales Trust for Investors, and it's eliminating the need for the 1031 exchange so you can create and preserve more wealth. And this is me, my wife, taking a picture in New York, which is a pretty fun trip we took just a year ago, October. And so I'm the founder of Capital Gains Tax Solutions. I'm a deferred sales trust expert. And I'm also, again, a commercial real estate investor and multifamily broker. And as a legal disclaimer, I am not a CPA nor a tax attorney, although we do work, my business partner is that, and he's the one who provides the tax and legal advice. But we also encourage each of you to seek your own individual tax and legal advice and professional to help you along this journey, okay, to understand what it is, what it's not. And we love working with CPAs and professionals that our clients have built relationships with to make sure that it's a great fit and it's a good investment for you. So as the agenda, we're going to learn how to escape feeling trapped by capital gains tax using a deferred sales trust. By the way, not to be confused with the Delaware Statutory Trust. That's just like a Delaware 1031. Those often gets confused with DSTs. We like to call those Blockbuster. Blockbuster is 1031 or Delaware Statutory Trust, and kind of the old school way of doing things. Still have their place, but for most of our clients that find us, It's because that those aren't solving the problems. And so we're going to talk about that, and also how to unlock sleeping capital to increase your cash flow and your tax flow. Okay. And so the question for everyone listening to this is, are you reluctant to sell because of capital gains tax? And do you feel trapped? And see, every single day we work with millionaires, that are reluctant to sell because of the capital gains tax. And again, it's somewhere between 25, 30 to 50% of their gain, depending on the state, depending on the depreciation recapture, when they go to sell. And so, and this involves, by the way, real estate owners. And it could be primary home or investment real estate. It can be a business owner, cryptocurrency and stock owners. And every day they pay hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars in capital gains tax when they don't have to. So who is the deferred sales trust for? Or it's for you if you have at least $1 million net proceeds and $1 million gain per transaction. Okay, so it's got to be, you bought something for $1 million, it went to $2 million. Oh, you qualify, right? You bought something for $500,000, it went to $1.5 million, you qualify. The other thing is the net proceeds. You need to have at least $1 million net proceeds. So you might have debt and closing costs. So that's the parameter there to start with. Now there is one exception to that. Let's imagine you have two assets at $500 each. $500,000 gain, $500,000 net proceeds. So you might have an LP position, right? Or a GP position that you can stack on top of each other to combine. It's sort of like when you buy apartments, you want to buy 100, 200, 300 units or more because you can scale with property management. Same idea here with the Deferred Sales Trust. And again, it works for investment real estate, business sales. It can save a failed 1031 exchange, yes, without even identifying it, as long as you're working with a qualified intermediary that is our strategic alliance, which we have to work with and provide for you, even past your 45-day identification period, even in California. Okay, we do deals every single week. It works. It's never failed. We'll talk about the legal track record. Again, GP, LP interest. It also works for cryptocurrency. We just did a $5 million exit for a client who sold crypto at Bitcoin at $54,000 a coin. That was powerful because you know what happened past all of the time, the last 4 months. Crypto crashed, so they were able to get out and diversify. Works for NFTs, works for primary homes. We did a high-end luxury $8.3 million primary home in Palo Alto, private stock, public stock, carried interest, captive insurance, artwork. Really anything that's highly appreciated, the Deferred Sales Trust works for. So what is a Deferred Sales Trust? Well, Deferred Sales Trust is an installment sale that's partnered or combined with a trust. Okay. And by the way, there's thousands of different trusts out there. This is a particular business trust, but it's in business to purchase your asset before you sell it and sell it to the ultimate buyer. Hold the cash and pay you back slowly over time. In other words, you become the lender to this trust that is right in between you and the ultimate buyer, which, by the way, it's sort of like a 1031 exchange if you think about it. What happens? The 1031 exchange company comes in between you and receiving the cash, and the funds are in a deferral state as long as you're in that 1031 qualified intermediary. So that's the basics of the Deferred Sales Trust, and the trust will pay you back over time, typically about 8% compounded net rate of return and net of fees. But the magic starts to happen about why do you actually need one of these things. And I want to give you the story of the Monday morning quarterback. And Ellis, if you're here, I want you to chat with me a little bit about this Monday morning quarterback, right? Which was, Ellis, who's your favorite football team?
I'm a quarterback guy, actually. So I'm a big Pat Mahomes fan. I was a big Peyton Manning fan. So Denver Broncos is probably who holds my allegiance.
Okay, there we go. So Pat Mahomes, right? I'm sure there's a few plays this last year where you're like, if Pat would have known that blindside, guy was coming, or so-and-so is open in the corner, Pat's amazing, but he might have missed something. In other words, if he had the replay before it happened, he could probably execute even more. Instead of 7 touchdowns, he could have like 12.
Easily, yeah.
Okay, and so the whole idea of the Monday morning quarterback is if what we know, we could go back in time, then what would we have done differently? And this brings me back to the 2008 crash, right? Which is the beginning of my introduction to the need for the Deferred Sales Trust and the displeasure with the 1031 exchange. And the story goes like this. This gentleman right across the street from the Minnesota Vikings Stadium, He's selling a $20 million asset, Ellis. And for the first time, he's looking at it with his 1031 binoculars. And he's going, this doesn't make any sense. These prices are too high. I'm either A, going to just pay all my tax, but I'm not going to overpay, or B, I'm going to take this new strategy of deferred sales trust. New to him. It had been around for a lot of years at that point. And so he decided to take that leap of faith, if you will, right? And trust but verify, worth a couple $100 million, sophisticated investor, commercial real estate. By the way, this guy hates the stock market, makes all of his money in commercial real estate. But he goes, you know what? It's better to put it there and wait and to see if this market changes, because he thought something was going to happen, okay? So what did he do? He sold the $20 million asset. He deferred millions of tax, and he parked it into the deferred sales trust, put it into conservative stocks, bonds, mutual funds, stuff that wasn't subject to huge crashes. Like just he just wanted to just keep his money kind of safe there, okay? Well, guess what happened? 5 years later, the bank calls him up and says, you know what, Mr. Commercial Real Estate Owner, we just foreclosed on that property that you sold to that buyer. He goes, oh yeah, that 1031 buyer. He goes, yeah. Well, we're just curious, do you want to buy it back from us? And he goes, well, maybe. What's the price? And the bank said 60 cents on the dollar. So he says, give me a couple days. I'm going to reallocate my investments with the trust into an LLC. And he purchased it back at 60 cents on the dollar, 40% discount. In other words, he sold high and he bought low. He did the Monday morning quarterback. He dropped back. He sold it like the perfect time. And then he waited and he bought it like at the perfect time, right? And the whole idea is because the deferred sales trust, without paying $1 in tax, was that vehicle to be able to do this, okay? Instead of the 1031, 45-day 180. So Ellis, being able to have a Monday morning quarterback opportunity, given the conditions right now, what would that mean for some of your investors to be able to diversify, right? Put it into value add commercial real estate, apartments, and really pro-business states like Texas, right? That have a true value add, increase, no rent control, lockout, right? Like California does, or some of these places like New York. What would that mean to be able to sell high, diversify, all tax deferred?
Yeah, I mean, think about, I'm sure a lot of folks wish they would have gotten out of some of their stocks earlier this year, but probably for the sake of experiencing taxes. And I know I'm the same way. I own a significant amount of Tesla stock, and I don't want to sell it because I don't want to pay the taxes. And if there were, so again, I think that's the case even right now. I mean, we have had a recovery of the market, and if you have a pessimistic view of kind of where things are going to go over the next 2 to 3 years, it may be a good opportunity to potentially take some more off the table while things are better, and then put into hard assets. So yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity right now.
Absolutely. And the big picture is diversification, right? So what he really did was sell a highly appreciated asset because he had a great buyer, and he diversified for 5 years, and then he dollar cost averaged back into different investments. And so that's the idea here. It's not necessarily saying sell and sit in the stock market for 5 years. That's not the point. This guy hates the stock market. He loves real estate, right? The point was good time to sell, good time to diversify, good time to defer the tax, and let's keep our powder dry and ready to go. Okay, and so the deferred sales trust not only defers the capital gains tax, allows you to go back into real estate, passive or active, whenever you want. You can dollar cost average into the stock market. Money can just sit in the bank. You can put into hard money lending. You can do ground up development, but you can also defer the income tax. In other words, the trust doesn't have to pay you out. It's like an IRA. You put the money in, it can just, all the interest and the earnings can build. Now, it does have to pay you back at a certain point. We typically wait a couple of years, but not right away. And so that can lower your income tax as well if you're in a high tax state, which is really great. Again, it's also a backup plan for a failed 1031. We'll talk about more of that in a minute. You also get a new depreciation schedule should you be an active investor, which is really powerful way to reset a depreciation schedule, which is 27 and a half years for multifamily, 39 for commercial. And when you do 1031s, your old depreciation schedule travels. And so in this scenario, you can keep a new depreciation schedule if you partner with the trust. We'll explain how to do that. The most important thing is optimal timing when it makes sense for you. So there's no 45-day, 180 requirement. In fact, you can just slowly take your time to find deals that make sense. You can also solve or eliminate the 40% estate tax by moving funds outside your taxable estate. We use the DST Plus for that. It's a little bit different. But the key things, diversification, liquidity, debt freedom. You can increase your cash flow, and you can retire if you want to, and you can also start a new business if you want to. So my goal for this presentation is to help you learn how to grow your cash flow with the Deferred Sales Trust, even if you don't have any capital gains tax deferral knowledge or a ton of time, how to save a failing 1031 exchange to invest into syndications and or other assets via the Deferred Sales Trust, and how to leverage the Deferred Sales Trust to grow your wealth, eliminate estate tax, and increase your tax flow immediately. And so as a quick background, I started out at Marcus & Millichap in 2006, specializing in multifamily brokerage. I also grew up in my family, building custom homes and room additions in the Bay Area. My mom and my dad. I've always loved real estate and cash flow. And I'm currently also a multifamily broker at eXp Commercial. I have experiences with 1031 exchanges, Delaware Statutory Trust, Deferred Sales Trust, and I've held my Series 22 and 63, and I'm a California real estate broker still right now. But it wasn't always like that, guys. In fact, in 2006, I was not Leonardo DiCaprio, just closing deals on cold calls. I was one of the guys in the back scratching my head. My cousin was the guy that was closing, and I was learning from an amazing mentor and kind of a big brother over all the years. And I was just trying to make it in the business. In fact, I was brand new, barely surviving, barely getting by, newly married. I had been very successful in college and basketball scholarship and academic scholarship. I had a couple degrees and a minor, so I was used to really succeeding. But for the first time, I hit a brick wall, and that brick wall was the 2008 crash. And I went from making just a little bit of money in commissions to like zero overnight. And it was a shock to the system, not so much so that it brought up a lot of the past. And the past was my parents were very wealthy in the Bay Area, 80s and 90s, building a ton of wealth with all these developments. And the divorce happened. And then the divorce, my dad had all the money and he didn't really pay much child support. Let's just put it that way. And I lived with my mom. And so I saw wealth on both sides. And I knew at a young age that I wanted to be able to have margin in my wealth plan and with my family. I don't have to feel that pressure of all of what we went through with a lot of wealth and then no wealth. And then, living with my grandma, barely having a car, those things. The Lord always provided. I'm a Christian. I'm a believer. He always provided good mentors, good coaches, good youth pastors. And so I was able to really, benefit from even some of these struggles, but didn't have dad in the house but still had dad as a hardworking entrepreneur who taught me real estate. And when I spent time with dad, we would still build houses and do these things. So, but the point of all this is when I hit the wall, and I was newly married and baby on the way, all of that fear came back to me like, oh my gosh, am I going to feel like my dad, right? Is this going to create a situation where the finances is going to hurt the marriage and all of these fears? And so I was scared, and I was at the end of my rope financially and emotionally, and I had poured everything into this investment real estate. I remember sitting in an office for another 1031 exchange that blew up. The deal didn't close, and everyone was scared about buying, and I was just really distraught. It's hard for me to get distraught. I'm a really optimistic guy, but I remember just crying, like, and all the pressure, all the stress with my mentor. And I wasn't sure what to do. And so did what every good, again, entrepreneur, real estate wannabe, or anyone who's in business that, at some point might have to do. I went and got a job, a side hustle. And the side hustle is a place called Cheesecake Factory. And so, again, this was not me, Leonardo DiCaprio. This was me. I was serving cheesecake. So I'd wear the same tie that I wore at Marcus & Millichap to my Cheesecake Factory job. In fact, I felt like Clark Kent, flying, I'd be, Superman, big time hotshot real estate broker trying to close deals, big deals. And then by night I'd swipe, or switch into my cheesecake area and put my apron on, and boom, I'm serving cheesecake just to keep the lights on. And then we moved with my brother into a small condo. And I always share this story because not only was I going through this financial struggle, so were my clients. And my clients were going through a little bit different. They were millionaires that were losing maybe half or all of it over a 3-year period of time, fighting with banks or trying to negotiate with banks. And so by day, I'd help them with their situation. And by night, I'd just keep the lights on. So I did this for a 2-year period of time where it was burning the candle both ends, 60, 70-hour weeks, nights and weekends, just all the time. And it's during this time, I don't know how many of you thought about it, but you learn, or you're willing to learn the most, right? When you're at the bottom and you really love something, commercial real estate, and yet you're chasing a business and entrepreneurial dream, yet the cash flow is zero. In fact, you're going into debt, you're burning your savings, and, some friends, go get a real job. What are you doing? You have a baby at home now, you got to grow up. But I believed in commercial real estate, and I was getting so much mentorship and coaching that I didn't feel called to leave. I felt called to go through this challenge. And it's during this time that my business partner came in and spoke about the Deferred Sales Trust. And he told us that the pain that your clients are facing did not have to be felt right now. They could have diversified, sold, been out of debt, on the sidelines waiting. And that you as a real estate professional can now provide this solution to help you separate yourself from the competition. So I thought it was a win-win. I could solve the pain and I can grow my business. And so I was excited. I'm pumped. And guess what? I start cold calling people. And people, hung up on me. They said it sounds too good to be true. And then, but slowly but surely, as the deal started to roll and close, and I became more proficient in what it was, people started to meet with me, and they were open-minded. And they said, "This is true, Brett. This is the Netflix versus the Blockbuster 1031 exchange." So fast forward, my business started to grow. I started to get in front of more people. And fast forward, my wife and I now have 5 kids. We live here in Sacramento, California. And now I just coach and train people across the country on how to do this, mostly from Zooms and some conferences. And my wife's been able to stay full-time home with our kids, which has been part of our dream and one of our values. And so, and I just teach people how to do this. And so after 10 plus years, I've discovered the hard way. And how many of you want to learn the easy way? I'm going to try to download my brain into your brain as fast as I can. And by the way, if you've been struggling, this is probably why. And I call it the perfect storm. There's really a couple things that are pretty we're up against. Okay, real estate all-time highs, stock market all-time highs until a little bit recently, and then crypto all-time highs until a little bit recently. Okay, and those are starting to shift. And who knows where real estate's going to be here? But you got to make sure you're buying, again, value add, forced appreciation opportunities with people like Ellis to make sense of where, instead of just overpaying for property. So you got to be careful with that. But we're like all-time highs. And in fact, another part of that is there's $32 trillion of assets that the baby boomers are going to be transferring from one generation to the next. So those are like, Ellis and my parents that are transferring it to us in the next 18 or so years, according to the American Bankers Association. In fact, there's about 10,000 baby boomers turning 65 every single day, and there's 77 million in the U.S. alone. Then you have the political challenges, 30 trillion plus in debt. They're talking about taking away the 1031 exchange, talking about eliminating the estate tax, increasing capital gains tax, a lot of challenges with this. And so it's more important than ever to have the tax flow conversation and expertise versus just the cash flow. Okay. And by the way, it's not your fault that you don't know about the Deferred Sales Trust. Your CPA doesn't know about it either. Every single day we have CPAs that we need to educate and coach. And then honestly, 99% of them join us once they spend some time with us. So we don't say no to your CPA. We want to bring them in to the conversation, educate them, answer their questions and their concerns, and they end up often joining us. Okay. By the way, the 1031 exchange does not work for primary homes. This is also one of the struggles. It doesn't work for business stock, doesn't work for Tesla stock, doesn't work for private or public stock, artwork, collectibles, cryptocurrency, but the Deferred Sales Trust works for all of these. Okay. So it's the Netflix versus the Blockbuster 1031. And by the way, if you've tried to exit real estate with the traditional 1031 exchange, then you've no doubt felt the pressure and felt trapped under the 180-day window. We call this the shotgun wedding. Ellis, do you have any friends that got, married, at a young age, and they did it really quick, and, maybe it didn't go as well as it could have? I know I have had those folks, but it's called the shotgun wedding. You've heard about that, Ellis?
Yeah, I might have even been a part of one or two of those in my day.
Oh, man. I got you. I won't ask you if you were the best man or for that.
Yeah, not the webinar for that. Not the webinar for that.
Yeah, for sure. But that's kind of like the 1031. That they want to, squeeze this ring real fast with the deal, and you're going to get married to it. And it's going to be long term, and it's a challenge, right? And this often doesn't work out very well, right? Especially if you want liquidity diversification, if you want to be passive, retired, or if you just want to be smart and not overpay for a property, okay? So by the way, the Delaware Statutory Trust, remember I said in the beginning, this is not that. I'm going to do really quickly what that is. That's the inflexible passive way, okay? Delaware Statutory Trust, aka what you've been forced to do for the past 10 years, or even still now, not have liquidity. The funds are tied up for 7 to 10 years. The Delaware Statutory Trust, you're not diversified. Fees are very high, as high as 14% or more. They go to multiple securities professionals in between. In fact, for every dollar, sometimes, only 85% only hitting the real estate. So it's huge fees, okay? And I've done Delaware Statutory Trust, so I've seen these. I've been securities licensed. I've given those up because I no longer do Delaware's, although we have a strategic alliance that does those, okay? But also the 7 deadly sins of the Delaware. Look that up, okay? The main big one of the Delaware's is typically not value add. By the rules, they typically need something that's the opposite of what we're trying to do, especially with Ellis, which is value add, increase the rent substantially, do things that are going to add significant amount of value and forced appreciation. The Delaware typically doesn't have that, okay? However, there are some positives for sure, right? Non-recourse loans, and these are typically turnkey, beautiful properties with Class A locations, properties, and tenants, and first-class operators. So there's amazing groups running these things, and so these guys are really smart, and I think it can be a safe investment, right? It just depends on your risk tolerance, but the biggest thing with the Delaware is it's you're selling high and typically buying higher in 180 days. It's still that window there, and you're maybe putting all of your equity into like 1 or 2 deals. Post close also, though, there's no more new management. The operators do all that. They do all the new leases, new utilities, new laws, new collections, new evictions. I call this the peaceful mailbox money or sleepy real estate capital. Like you could just, kind of just get your mailbox money, and around 5% is where a lot of these are at, and it can absolutely be a solution for you. But I don't think it's the entrepreneurial one. And again, I think has some real downfalls. Now, it does solve mortgage over basis, okay? And we do use Delaware Statutory Trust to solve mortgage over basis. And then we combine that with the Deferred Sales Trust to be able to get you the freedom and the flexibility that you're probably looking for. So we just did one in Colorado, for example, for a client who sold a $4.5 million multifamily property. He had about $1 million of debt over basis. And so we did a partial 1031 exchange via the Delaware, and then the rest of it went into the Deferred Sales Trust. And so the Delaware, for that reason, is really an excellent tool, okay? But I'm going to walk you through how to eliminate the 1031 exchange forever right now so you can create and preserve more wealth. But first, a few examples. This is for a client of mine. He sold a $48 million property as a joint partner with his partner in Las Vegas, deferred about $27 million in tax. This is his 5th transaction with me, collectively over $100 million in multiple states and multifamily property exits. As a GP, he's able to exit. His LPs can just pay their tax. And so the key is, although one of the LPs did defer his tax because he had a big enough gain, and that's going great right now. And so that's just so you know, they can both do it. But if a lot of the investors that are $50,000, $100,000, it's not applicable. But for the larger investments, like $1 million or more, it can be applicable. Okay. And actually, this is the deal I was just telling you about with the dual Delaware and Deferred Sales Trust. In fact, I have this on my website and my YouTube channel, capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. You can hear this whole story of how he used the Delaware Statutory Trust and the Deferred Sales Trust. That was a complex in Colorado. This is another one we did for a client out of California. We moved the funds outside their taxable estate. This is a multifamily property, $5.1 million sale. This is a car wash we just closed recently for about $12.75 million for a client. They bought the land. Their basis was about $4 million all in, and they deferred capital gains tax about 40% because it's California. 3 of them did the Deferred Sales Trust. 1 of them just paid their tax, so we can also separate the partnership. Not everyone has to move together, which is a good flexible way to exit partnerships, okay? Here's another client of mine. He's worth about $40 million, and we saved his failed 1031 exchange, and he also had a debt over basis. We did a partial Delaware and deferred about $1.2 million of tax. He was very happy. Again, we talked about the Bitcoin sale. That one happened out of Silicon Valley. Another one happened out of the East Bay for some Ethereum. In fact, this client went on to do another $5 million worth with Ethereum exits, and he was really happy because he had a lot of money in Celsius. I know, Ellis, did you have any money in Celsius? A lot of these places got absolutely clobbered, okay, and we were able to get our clients out before this whole mess happened. And he said literally it saved him millions of dollars because he thinks it's all going to be gone. Do you have anyone in Celsius? You hearing about this kind of stuff?
Oh yeah. I have my own stories there, but yeah, it's that was pretty significant. Thankfully, I did not own any Celsius coin, but I actually did have some money in Celsius. I had actually drawn it out as things started to move, thankfully. But yeah, that's a huge issue.
Absolutely. So we can get out and get diversified into real estate, okay, without having to suffer what the madness of the crash, right? And these billions of dollars that it's gone. And so I called him up and I said, hey, did you have any money in Celsius? And he said, I did. And I said, did you lose? He said, I lost about $1 million. And I said, well, what would you have lost had you not exited your $7.5 million? He goes, probably another couple million. And so he's very, very happy that he's protected, he's diversified, he did not have to suffer that consequence, okay? Another primary home sale, $8.3 million in Palo Alto. And so now I'm going to share the how, okay? Here's the steps. Step 1, map out a wealth plan, okay? We'll work with your financial advisor. We'll work with your CPA. We'll work with Ellis, right? We'll work with whatever you're trying to accomplish. Let's get a vision for that. And then let's use the Deferred Sales Trust as the tool, like an IRA, like a 401k, like a 1031 exchange, like a Delaware. And let's see how that Delaware Deferred Sales Trust will solve your problems, right? And the funds can be put into places like TD Ameritrade, right? If you want to do that and be diversified. They can also again be put in real estate, passive or active deals. But step number 2 is just to transfer the assets to the DST. What does that mean? Well, you can assign your interest of an LLC. We can set it up before the close of escrow. We have basically some language. We form a trust. We work with your escrow team or your M&A advisors, your attorneys, to have your ownership transferred to this newly formed deferred sales trust that only does business with you, by the way, never commingle with anybody else. You have 24/7 access to the funds online. The funds are removed without your signature. And only does, each trust is its own entity, and it only does business with you. And so you transfer it to this deferred sales trust. It's like a made-up name. It could be called the Colorado DST 2022, right? It has its own EIN. And you get in exchange a promissory note, right? A promissory note. And then the DST actually sells the asset. And upon the sale, the funds go into the trust, and you got the promissory note that owes you the money back, and the buyer takes title, and they are gone. Okay, so that is the step 2. Step 3, the proceeds, once they're sent to the deferred sales trust and the funds are invested, you can be active or passive. Okay, you can be a little bit of both. You can go into real estate by yourself or with others. You can go in the stock market. You can go into lending. You can go to a new business venture. It's as long as it's business or investment purpose, the trust, and it's diversified, and we keep the liquidity requirements, which are typically at least 20% of the total trust funds, liquid and still invested, still making returns. It just needs to stay liquid for 20% of it, but the rest of it's kind of open source. Okay, and again, real estate syndications, securities, investment, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, active real estate. You can purchase investment real estate by partnering with the DST funds. And that's pretty cool, right? You can form an LLC, partner with the trust puts up the funds, you can go build a project, go buy more property. That's how we get that new depreciation schedule, by the way, which you get 80% of. You can also be a passive real estate investing. You can do cryptocurrency investing, business venture, you can lend the funds. But the best thing is the diversification. And we really think right now is the time to preserve and protect, right? Be very cautious, diversified, and be wise, be out of debt. Keep your powder dry. I mean, are you in phase 1 of your life, creating the wealth, or are you in phase 2, retiring and protecting and living off the cash flow? Now, you're probably somewhere in between, and it can change based upon your needs and wants and desires and your risk tolerance. But we give you kind of both options with the deferred sales trust. And then step number 4 is just enjoy your wealth. Give more if you want to, but you don't have to. No forced charity. You can invest. You can start your new business venture. And it can invest with you. Again, the income overview is typically based upon a 10-year promissory note, which you can renew every 10 years for 10 years. You can pass it to kids. It's typically 8% compounding rate of return, net of all fees, not a guarantee, not a promise. We got to go invest the funds and make money. You can always cash out and just pay your tax, if you want to. You can move funds outside your taxable estate with the DST Plus to eliminate the 40% death tax. So, Ellis, are you ready to participate? We're going to talk about the how, which is really, really important. And we're going to use a scenario of a $10 million asset, and I'll let you choose that asset, Ellis, if you are there. And that asset could be anything. Would you like cryptocurrency? Would you like Tesla stock? Would you like a real estate asset? Would you like a primary home? What would you like, Ellis?
Yeah, I got a couple buddies living in La Jolla. Their home is probably on the beach, at least worth $10 million, and they're tired of all these California policies, and they're ready to move to the great state of Texas. And so let's go there.
Okay. Let's just say that the house is worth $2 million and they've been there for 25 years. Okay. Does that sound okay?
Sure.
Okay. And are they married or single, Ellis?
They're married.
Okay. So we're going to add that $500,121 exclusion, right? If you lived there the last 5 years. So that's going to increase our basis to $2.5 million. Do you think they put any improvements into this, or you just want to say it's worth $2.5 million?
Yeah. For simplicity's sake, it's worth that.
Okay. So $2.5 million. All right, so we're going to take $10 million minus 2.5, which gives us a $7.5 million gain, right, Ellis? And the state of California, it's 33%. So for simple math, we're going to round up from 2.475. We're going to round up to 2.5 million. Okay, that is the tax we're trying to solve for. All right. So what are we going to do? Well, Ellis is going to find an amazing luxury realtor. Maybe they already have one, and they're going to list it and get the highest price of $10 million. But what they're going to do is they're not going to receive the cash directly from the cash buyer. They're going to set up the trust to come in right in between close of escrow. And they're going to sell it to the trust for $10 million. And the trust is going to turn around, sell it to the cash buyer. Now, the cash buyer can also get a lender. It doesn't matter how he gets the cash. We don't really care. It just needs to come with $10 million. And the trust is going to buy it for $10 million and sell it for $10 million. So, Ellis, here's the question for you. If it bought and sold for the same price, what's the gain at the trust level?
Hopefully zero.
Zero. You got it. Bought it for 10, sold it. There's no gain, so there's no tax. The $10 million hits the trust account, Now, your clients, and let's imagine own it free and clear to keep it simple. They're going to receive a promissory note, okay, for $10 million. So they got a zero down payment, and a note says it's owed to them at $10 million. Okay. So if they received a zero down payment, how much tax is triggered today on zero if they receive zero?
0.
Got it. And so they're in a deferral state. You see that? And this is typically at 8% compounding rate of return net of fees. So Ellis, do you have any questions on this at all so far?
The 8%, that's tell me what that is again.
That is what's, if you got a loan from a bank, right? It's the interest that's accruing that's owed to them based upon the term of the note.
And so help me, is that what's growing on that, or that's what they're having to owe based on the loan?
That's what the trust owes you, but we have to go make the investments to it's not a guarantee, not a promise. We got to go put it into things that are going to be producing ideally greater than that so that it can pay them back, right?
Got it.
Any more questions on this? What just happened here?
Can you still hear me? I can see you fine.
Okay. It's pretty straightforward.
We do have a question from Christina. Does the trust structure avoid eminent domain law? Is this based on legislative or contract law? Now's the time to answer that?
Yeah, we can try to answer that. So eminent domain law, and my understanding of that is basically the government's going to come in and say you must sell this thing, right? And so, or we'll give you a fair market value or whatever. We'll work a deal with you. And so in this scenario, the deferred sales trust takes an asset to sell. So if you were going to sell that asset, we could structure the deal with that as the buyer being the government, right, coming in to buy it, and we can defer the tax. And so it wouldn't eliminate eminent domain law, right? But it would help you defer the capital gains tax should that happen. Does that make sense, Ellis?
Yeah. Keith wants to know, what is the downside risk if the trust investments go south and therefore the value of the trust declines?
Great question. Well, first of all, here's the good news. Remember this 2.5 million up here? By the way, the government is charging 0% on this. If you're a married couple, you get a $10 million deferral amount per year, or $5 million single. If it's a greater than that amount, we use the DST plus. We get it outside your taxable estate. But really the question before we go there, Ellis, is, if the government gave you a $2.5 million loan at 0% and said just invest it and live off the interest. Now, as you get interest payments, you'll pay tax on that. But when would you want to pay back that loan at 0% at $2.5 million? Never, right? So the whole idea is you keep this $10 million invested in different things like multifamily syndications, like securities investments, some maybe a little bit of crypto. Again, you diversify, whatever you feel comfortable with and based upon your risk tolerance. However, we can't guarantee that we're going to make money on this. That's part of investing, right? However, we do have an extra 25% of your equity is working for you. So that should create a cool thing, which means what? If you had 70.5 million and I've got 10 million, Ellis, I can be, let's say, 25% more conservative on my investments. So the question is not really, well, what if it doesn't do it? Well, where would you put the money anyways? Well, I would have put it here anyways. Okay, great. Would you like to have 10 million in that same investment or 7.5 million? So the nature of the deferred sales trust doesn't change the nature of the risk. In fact, we build in diversification, so it actually should lower your risk. Now, we also come alongside of you and try to give you great ideas, but you're the CEO of this, and you must approve of all investments. Now, I'm the trustee. I've got to approve too. I'm a third-party unrelated trustee. That's our role, okay? So it's got to be separate from you. You can't have unilateral control. You do not own the trust. These are all the things that, just like you 1031 qualified intermediary, you don't own those either. You have to be separate. So, but hypothetically, let's just say this 10 million goes to zero, Ellis. Well, how much tax do you owe on zero if it goes to zero? Zero. So yeah, there is risk. It's not a guarantee, but we'd like to say we're working with some of the best like Ellis to give you some certainty of some returns. Does that make sense?
Yeah, let me ask you a question to help solve for a cash flow issue. So someone is typically probably selling an asset because, in most of our cases at least, selling an asset may have some large gains. In selling it because they have a lot of equity, but no cash flow. And so they're trying to solve for cash flow here. And so I guess my question is, they sell whatever the asset is, they have equity, DST. How do we solve for cash flow? And then how does the money actually get to us? And then are we only just paying taxes on that income that would, let's say it's from we'd be paying passive income tax there, or like on from the real estate, or are we, when we start to receive any cash that maybe is from, lending off the DST, are we then having, any type of recapture tax that way? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Let's start with the first part of it, right? And this is a great scenario, right? If your friends live in La Jolla and it's their primary house and they're not renting it out, but they might say, "Well, I'm going to go rent it out." Okay, well, here's the question: how much do you think you could rent that out for per month? What do you think, Alice? Give me a number.
35, $5,000.
$5,000. Okay, so there's $5,000. Now, what's $5,000 times 12?
60.
60K. Well, would you rather have 60K per year, or what's $800,000 divided by 12? $66,000 per month. Okay, so you see how we just basically 10x your cash flow? Right? Now we need to go make those returns somewhere else, but the point is, yeah, especially primary homes. This is a great example. Primary homes, your net equity is so high, you can't get the rents to make sense on that. That's why you want to sell that primary to ultra.
So you're saying the most we could get from a cash flow on 2 million is 8%, or the most you could get return from the DST is 8%. Is that kind of,
that's
because
a conservative number?
That's
That's our conservative number. No, we can absolutely get more. We can absolutely get more. But the idea is every year to get 8% compounding, which is $800,000, which is $66,000 a month, versus just $60,000 a year. So let me talk about how to get more. Okay. How to get more. And this is really important because the trust can go into investments with you as a joint venture partner. Okay. And this is how we do it. Ellis forms an LLC, or whoever's selling the asset. Let's just say your Ellis's friend or client. Okay. And this LLC is going to be split 80-20. 20% to the trust and 80% to the LLC. Okay, now the LLC is owned by you, Ellis, but you're going to give up 20% to the DST, and the DST is going to put up all the money. Okay, in this scenario, they can put up to $8 million of the $10 million. So Ellis, you put no money in. The trust puts up $8 million, which, remember, there's an extra $2.5 million that we're putting in there, which is pretty cool, right? Now, let's say you take this money, you want to go buy a $25 million project, okay? So you buy this $25 million apartment complex. Now, you turn this deal into $40 million over 5 years. I don't know, right? Let's just do $30 million. Let's just say it's an extra $5 million gain, okay? So over 5 years. Now, the trust is going to want, for its $8 million, it's going to want an 8% pref on its $8 million, and it's going to want 20% ownership. So if you did that over 5 years, you're going to take 8 million times 8 million times 8%, 640,000. Okay, so 640 times 5 is basically 3.2 million is the pref. Okay, so the original 8 million is going to come back into the trust because that's where it came from, plus that 8% pref of 3.2 million. I really got to get an Apple Pencil on this bad boy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how do I get there? Well, I did 640,000 times the 5-year term, which leaves approximately 5 million minus 3.2, which is 5 million.
1.8.
Yeah, 1.8. Yeah. Boom. Guess where the 1.8 goes, Ellis? Well, per the LLC agreement, 80-20. Boom. Boom. Okay, 20%. Then that would roll into the trust. But remember, this whole time, this trust is compounding at 8% on that 10 million. So the first misconception is, well, I'm giving up 20%. Well, no. The trust has got to pay back, the LLC's got to pay back the trust, and the trust has got to pay you. Okay? But now you have an extra $1.8 million, or 80% of $1.8 million. So that's 300, that's, I'm going to do that again. 1.8 million, 80%. That's 1.44 million. That Ellis, you put no money into this deal. Okay. The trust put all of the money in, and that's 1.4 million to you, which, oh, by the way, you can roll into the DST as promissory note number 2 and we call this rinse, wash, repeat, you now have a note at 10 million at 8%, and you have another one at 1.4 million at 8%.
And let me ask you this real quick. Is there a custodian or someone, I think a part of this is you kind of throw out this and it seems like, seems like more involved of like, well, how do I make sure I'm not, doing anything that would cause us to default or, incur any liability taxes? How does that work? Is there a custodian for this account?
Yeah, there's basically three major parties. First of all, is the tax attorney who created the structure 26 years ago. Thousands of closes, billions under management, over a dozen no-change IRS audits. Okay, and they provide lifetime audit defense, which is maybe even more important question. What happens when the IRS comes knocking? They provide lifetime audit defense for the Deferred Sales Trust, state or federal. Number two, there's me, the trustee. I'm a third-party, unrelated trustee. You could think of me like a custodian, and I create the barrier between you and the tax. I can't be a brother, a cousin, a best man in your wedding, a former team member, or a secretary outside your door, right? It's this separation. By the way, that's how a qualified intermediary works as well. Third party. Think of a 1031. They just don't give you the interest on the money. They hold the money for 180 days, and they typically don't give you any interest. They charge you the fee, right? And then you roll it into your next deal. Think of us like a 1031, but we're going to pay you the interest, right? Interest on your money. Does that make sense, Ellis?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the other third party is the financial advisor. So we use a securities professional to especially for the funds that are going to stock market, right? And so it's like the separation of powers. We're never the same umbrella. We're all, we're the same umbrella, but we're not the same company. We're separately necessarily to keep the integrity and the transparency of the trust, holding each other accountable.
A couple questions, or a few more questions that I have for sure. Let's say someone is trying to 1031. How early does this need to be? And what if they've already sold the asset and they're in a 1031? Can they move that into a DST?
Yeah, let me finish the presentation here, and it's going to cover that, right? Okay. So again, what your investors or what you've had to do, and it's frustrating, right? You had to stay millions in gain in real estate. The primary home is a great example, or in cryptocurrency, a business, or anything. You just couldn't sell it. You didn't want to sell it because of the tax, or you had to borrow against your real estate or crypto. You had to do reverse mortgages. You had to take on a bunch of debt. And then of course Celsius happened, and all of a sudden, it's a whole nother just disaster, right? Because of what happened, right? Or you have to give it all the way to charity. Nothing wrong with giving it to charity, but most of our clients don't want to give it all the way to charity. You had to not sell your business, stock, or primary home at the optimal time because of the 1031 property, or you had to overpay for a 1031 and had more time, energy, toilets, trash, tenants, employees, and liability. You had to become the lender for a single buyer. Okay, which some people say, well, why not just become a lender for the single buyer and just use the traditional installment sale? Well, because that person is not investment grade, nor is your money diversified, nor is your money liquid, nor can you buy other opportunities with it or partner with the. In other words, it's just one person, and you might have to foreclose on that property or that business, which is probably the reason you want to sell anyways. You don't want to have to take it back if they don't pay you on time, and those are very low interest rates, maybe 4 or 5%. There's all the reasons why the traditional installment sale is Blockbuster, right? And what we have is Netflix. You had to stay in debt. You had to pay the tax, and the biggest thing is you were not able to invest when and where you wanted to. Okay. So I want to teach you how to grow your DST, how to cash flow with the DST, even if you don't have any capital gains tax deferral knowledge or a ton of time. Number one is like what Ellis was saying. Understand your ROE. Your ROE is your return on your equity, right? Your total value of your asset, and then the actual cash flow it's producing, right? And if you're renting a really high-end primary home, right, or you have a business that's worth $50 million, but it's only producing, $3 million of cash flow, but you could sell it for a really high multiple, well, you can unlock that equity and redeploy it, right? Or like the deal I just did 2 days ago for a client, they had $2.5 million in equity, and their cash flow was only $120,000. It was a 15-unit apartment complex in Sacramento. And we went through the ROE, and I said, look, your ROE right now is $120,000 for your NOI. I go, but with the trust, we can get to about $190,000 in ROE, right? And our ROE was 120. We can basically increase it by 60%. And you don't have the liability, you don't have the rent control, you don't have the headaches, the toilet trash liability. And you can diversify and be patient. And they're like, oh, that way it clicked for them, right? So really understand your ROE And Ellis and I can help you run you through that with your current investment. And then number 2 is understand your ROE on the net proceeds of the deferred sales trust. In other words, closing costs, commissions you're going to pay, the fees that you're going to pay us, and then compare those two. And then next is just the DST invests the funds and pays you, right? That's really the plan. Okay, so that's how to grow your cash flow. Now, how to save a failing 1031 exchange. Okay, this is really important. Okay, and by the way, to be able to invest into syndications or other assets via the Deferred Sales Trust. Remember, because the Deferred Sales Trust is not a 1031, we don't have to carve out or do any TICs or Delawares or any of these things that are more complex and can be challenging. In fact, the Deferred Sales Trust is not a 1031, therefore it can go in like a passive investor would into a syndication. Okay, it's just an entity. Okay, and this entity, like an LLC, can be invested into these different investments. Okay, so number 1 is you want to connect with Capital Gains Tax Solutions, that's my company, to provide you with the qualified intermediary who's my strategic partner, who will allow this, not only allow it, but knows what they're doing. Guess what? Most qualified intermediaries don't want you to know about this. Most commercial real estate brokers don't want you to know about this. They want to keep you in the 1031 exchange blockbuster. And they have all the reasons why they think it doesn't work, or it's this or that or whatever. They have all their opinions. But literally, we just closed about a deal a week. We just did a $13 million deal in San Diego. We did a $29 million deal in Texas, south of Austin. $8 million deal in Palo Alto. $7 million deal in Santa Cruz. $5 million deal in Colorado, $3 million deal in Arizona, New Jersey, all over the country. We just keep closing deals, and it's a perfect track record, yet everyone has an opinion about it. And here's the thing, they have an agenda, and their agenda is to keep you in the 1031 exchange, so be aware of that. But remember, the 1031 only works for investment real estate, so it doesn't even work for a lot of the other assets. Okay, so now the key is now you have the strategic alliance that you've lined up with, you're working with us, and we can form the DST for you. No cost, no obligation, by the way. We only ever get paid if and when the deal closes and if you use it. But if for some reason you find a 1031, great, high five. You don't owe us anything, okay? The DST, though, if you close it, you pay us. We do it on day 46 or day 181. DST invests the funds and it pays you, okay? Now, here's the next secret here, how to leverage the DST to grow your wealth, eliminate estate tax, and increase your tax flow immediately. Not to be confused with cash flow. This is tax flow. And the first step is 1, close the DST or a DST plus. Okay, DST plus is for estate tax challenges and no limit. The biggest deal was a $125 million deal in San Diego. No limit, amazing. The DST is typically for $10 million deals and below per married couple per year. Number 2, you joint venture partner with via an LLC with the DST, and you invest into real estate, right? Because real estate provides you with depreciation, which is amazing, right? Which you can offset your cash flow. So in other words, you want to increase your tax flow so you can offset your cash flow. You want to ideally be every dollar you're receiving in cash flow, the tax depreciation offsets it. Now in Ellis's deals, they're going to do what's called cost segregation and bonus depreciation. And he has an amazing deal in Dallas. And guess what? This is a perfect opportunity to be able to do this. Okay. So, however, the difference though with that, by the way, is if you're an active versus passive. I got to clarify that. So if you're a passive investor, you won't get that depreciation because you're passive. But if you're an active investor or a GP on a deal, you can use this structure. So it's got to be something active, not passive. So that's a little bit of a nuance here. I want to make sure you understand. But step number 3, real estate pays the LLC, right? And you get some depreciation if you're active. And then number 4, the funds are moved outside your taxable estate if you use the DST plus. Okay. So this is the plan. You ready, Ellis? We're going to use the Deferred Sales Trust, so it can help you solve your cap gains and tax and estate tax problems. We're going to form a DST. We're going to transfer to the DST the asset. We're going to sell that asset. We're going to defer the tax. We're going to fund the trust, and we're going to invest. And the key is at optimal timing. At any time that you want to do it. It's beautiful. So it's time for the survey. If you're still here, I'd love for you to fill out this survey. And I'm also going to go for the fees quickly. And I'm going to put this into the chat. We would love the opportunity to serve you. capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. I'm going to open it up for questions. And
yeah, I got a very simple question. Like, so, I'm kind of a straightforward guy, man. I just want to know how much cash is coming in. So if I sell, what is the max amount of money cash flow wise I can get back if the DST is investing whatever? How much can I actually start to live off of? Is it 8%? Is that where that number is? What is the max amount?
Yeah, if you're completely passive, it's typically 8%, right? Typically 8% net of the fees, right? And the fees are, by the way, we'll do that right now. Basically, it's a 1.5% one-time fee on the first million, 1.25 on anything above. So let's say you had $1 million piece of property you're selling tomorrow, 15,000 at the close of escrow is paid. It's completely conditional. We work on a conditional basis. Okay. Has to close. You have to use the trust. If you don't close, you don't want to use the trust, you don't owe us anything. Okay. So that's 15,000. Our fee, my team, and combined with the financial advisor and my business partner, we're about 1.5 to 2% on the net proceeds. Okay. So, you pay commissions, you pay closing costs, you pay off debt. And let's just imagine it ended up being $1 million. It's about 15 to 20,000 on a recurring basis. Okay. And so what
annual recurring? What do you mean recurring?
Annual recurring. Yeah. It's just a recurring annual fee. Okay. About 15 to 20,000 based upon the AUM. And as you get higher at AUM, we give a fee break, and I can send you our fee breaks and all that. But that's the payment now, or that's the fees. Some miscellaneous fees like a tax return, a couple others. But net of the recurring fees, we're typically returning 5, 6, 7, or 8 based upon the risk tolerance of the client. But remember, on these deals, as long as we have $1 million net proceeds, $1 million gain, we're able to have an extra 30 to 50% that's working for you at 0%, right? That's the beauty of this. So that's why we have those minimums. Okay, so the fees really become an investment and not an expense on just the passive part of it. But now let's say I want to be able to make more, Brett. How do I make more? I don't want to give up all that upside, right? Because I'm not an owner right now. That's when you can become an active owner with an LLC, right? And you actively invest into something, and that way you can roll it back into the trust as well. So those are just some of the ways to do it. And of course, if you eliminate the estate tax, you just eliminate 40% of the death tax, which is incredible. Which, by the way, has nothing to do with the stepped-up basis. Step that we've been taught 1031 and swap until you drop. That's all about cap gains tax. But what about estate tax? If you're worth $100 million and the exemption is only 22 million, 24 million or so right now, 12 million single, if you're married, if you're 24, that's set to cut in half, you have an estate tax challenge. And so most people don't realize, or maybe they forget, but as a reminder, cap gains tax is only stepped up basis. The Deferred Sales Trust Plus, we can move it outside the taxable estate. But even if you use a regular DST, your kids can step into your shoes and you can keep the deferral going.
Last thing here, if we have to roll, Brett, are capital gains and depreciation recapture due on the amount that is paid back to the individual from the trust via the promissory note?
The answer is it all depends on the nature in which you take in straight line versus cost seg, and it all depends on the nature of when you receive it. It all depends if you have a mortgage over basis. And there's the thing, like that question is like in a Rubik's Cube, Ellis, right? There's a lot of moving parts and every client's a little bit different. And our goal is to try to get it like this where it's all congruent. So the best thing is to come to us with no cost, no obligation consultation, and we'll walk you through that. But most of our clients, honestly, are never dipping into the principal, right? So it's not even applicable. They're just living off the interest payments, right? And they take the golden goose of, in this scenario, let's say it's 10 million bucks. They're never touching that. They're living off the interest payments, and they just keep this thing building and building and building, and they're recasting it every 10 years for another 10 years and keep it going. So we'd want to work with your CPA. We'd want to understand the nature of your depreciation, and then we'd be able to give you an answer on that.
Right. Brett, so for the sake of time, man, we'll have to end this webinar. I want to keep it at about an hour so that folks watching the recording too is kind of what we can say. So this is really helpful. We did put the form in the chat, everyone who is here today, and we'll make sure in our email we'll include that as well. And if you are watching this and you'd like to get in touch with Brett, again, Capital Gains Tax Solutions is where you can find him. Brett, there we go, capitalgainstaxsolutions.com, capitalgainstaxsolutions.com if you want to get in touch with Brett. And again, the reason we're doing this is because we want to make sure we put the best people we know in this industry, who we trust, who we know, who we've worked with, in front of you so that we can partner and build wealth together. And so everyone, I hope you enjoyed this webinar, and hope to partner with you soon. Cheers, everybody.
Thanks, Ellis.